Hi, this is Stacy with Gooseberry Bridge Farm, bringing you a You Pick Flower Field update. I did an update last July, and if you want to go back and compare, I'm going to link that at the end of this video. It was a very different year last year. We had actual rain and reasonable temperatures. Our normal temperatures for July is high as around 90. This July we've been above normal pretty much every day. I think we had one normal day. This past week we've been at 100, 102. This is not normal for us, as I mentioned, and the flower field is suffering. Plus we haven't had any rain in 7 weeks, 8 weeks. Speaking of 7 to 8 weeks, let me show you my new friend. Daisy is our new puppy. She is a rat terrier, and she is going to help us with our mole problem as she grows older. I'm hoping by the winter she will be interested in digging up some moles. Even if she doesn't kill them, she could deter them. Come on, Daisy, let's go. We're gonna go show you some of what the moles have been doing here. Well, like when we have seedlings, they're always kind of a problem. But this year, I assume because the ground is so hard and dry everywhere, they are really concentrated in the field and around the areas where we have irrigation. So instead of just going under the rows like they normally do, these green spots out here are actually mole tunnels. Now that's kind of unusual. Normally where the moles go in the grass, you get dirt and brown patches because the roots are dug up. You can see a dirt pile right there. But the irrigation under these rows travels down through the mole tunnels. This area is kind of starting to turn brown, but you can see this here. These are all mole hills. After I run the irrigation, they fill with water. So they are all muddy and mushy, and it makes a nice soft area for the moles to dig through. The irrigation is also causing another challenge this year. Understandably, the grass, as you can see around the edges of the beds, is growing like it's springtime, and then we get out of the area where the mole tunnels are carrying the water and where the irrigation can reach, and we got brown and dead. The second row here is actually the only row we have that doesn't have irrigation, and you can see how it is completely brown next to it. We water this row, but I clearly don't water this grass. But this row up here has irrigation, and it leaches down the hill. Not all the way to the next row, unfortunately, but so I need to mow. But it's really difficult to mow when it's 100 degrees. And we're open in the evenings, and early morning mowing is not something I'm interested in right now. Another major challenge we're having with the drought is that all of the insects from the surrounding fields head over here to this oasis and are kind of wreaking havoc on things. We have a major problem with tarnished plant bugs. I'm gonna see if I can find some for you. But you can see these are zinnias, and you can see how they're like, this is a bud developing, and it is not normal. It is, I'm gonna pinch it off and try to show you. It is, it's only got a couple petals. It's not fully round. That is, and there's a bigger version of what it would look like if it opened. See how this one doesn't have all of its petals. Our more mature zinnia rows are still able to produce some perfect flowers, some beautiful flowers. This isn't a good example of that. There's the one on the right has tarnished plant bug damage, and the one on the left doesn't. We also have our marigolds over here that have produced basically nothing. Something is eating the insides out of all the buds, like that. See, those are buds, but they're empty. And we also have Japanese beetles that are eating the marigolds. These bigger marigolds are cocoa gold marigolds, and they are doing pretty well against the bugs. They're actually producing some flowers, but we also have some other colors in here that aren't even really growing because the bug pressure, the Japanese beetles have been just eating them. Look at all the butterflies. Can you see those? Also got all of these rows of zinnias up here. They're still a bit smaller than they should be for when we planted them. They are making a lot of flowers, which is good. They're trying, but the tarnished plant bugs have been pretty hard on them also. The cosmos are another section that is suffering. Last year my cosmos were giant and beautiful. These are tiny little like 1-inch flowers. It's hard to tell in the video and I don't have 2 hands, so and lots of them are just basically drying up on the end of the stem, so they just aren't even fully opening before they just shrivel. I'm not sure if this is pest damage or heat. They have a few tarnished plant bugs, but nothing like major. The leaves look fine, the plants look healthy. It's just that they their flowers look horrible, and there's like nothing usable out here. And this is our this should be our prime succession right now of cosmos, but see how they, like this one didn't even open all the way and it dried up. But it's been 102 for 3 days, so I guess you gotta expect that. Now we're walking back to the new part of the field that we didn't even have last year, and we have some things back here that are thriving in this heat. And we have sunflowers back here too. This was our dahlia row last year if you watched our other videos, and we have the tent set up, and I'll tell you about what we're doing there in a moment. The sunflowers are doing awesome though. They love this. I'm irrigating them, as you can see by the tall grass around the base, and they are loving it. Problem being that nobody's coming to pick them because it's too hot. But the pollinators are here and happy. And back to the other side, this is our celosia. It is looking fabulous. It looks so much bigger and better and happier than it did last year. It's beautiful. It's producing like crazy. It really likes the heat, and it is covered in tarnished plant bugs, but they don't really affect the blooms or the base life or anything else. The other one that has lots of tarnished plant bugs on it is the amaranth. It's getting gigantic. It's also covered in flea beetles, but amaranth flowers, see there's the flea beetles, they don't, you just pull off the leaves and don't use them and you're good. I also have some zinnias back here that are heavily affected by the tarnished plant bugs, probably partly because they're next to the amaranth and celosia, and the bugs are so thick back here. I'm gonna walk down this row. We've got some late planted blue Chinese forget-me-nots back here, and some late planted calendula that's actually doing really well, and the ageratum is really doing well. Let me get back to the shade. So this ageratum was kind of stunted in its trays, and I finally planted it out at about 1 inch tall, and I think that was some bad potting soil. I had several things that did that, the blue Chinese forget-me-nots and this calendula included. That's a whole nother video, but once I got it outside, it has done awesome. It likes heat, it doesn't mind any of this, and the bugs don't seem to like it at all, so it's doing really well. The calendula that's back here that's later planted is doing really well. I've had a few issues. Oh, I can actually see one right now. I've had a few issues with blister beetles on the calendula, which I always have in drought years. Blister beetles are named blister beetles because if you touch them, they give you blisters, supposedly. So you can't really just pick them off, but that's what they look like. You see those little gray beetles, and that's what their damage looks like. This is a relatively recent infestation because otherwise there would be no leaves left on this plant. So I will get something and try to get them off. This plant has a little damage, and that one over there I don't know if you can see it. We'll zoom in. Oh, there it is. See all that? That's blister beetle poop. So they're probably roaming around. But right now they're on that plant and there's not too many of them, so that's good. Just so you know why I only have one hand. Daisy wore out on me. So these cosmos over here are basically doing the same thing as the other ones. Lots of tight clusters of buds and then drying up before they can even bloom. It has to be the weather because we've never had cosmos do this before, and we've never really had weather like this before. Well, not since I've been doing all of this. So we also picked a pretty bad year to plant glads in crates. I'm watering them like 4 times a day to try to keep them alive. Our snapdragons are pretty well done, but half the row, this half toward me, is hanging in there, and I think they'll produce some more flowers when it cools off. I don't really have anything to put here to replace them, so I'm not bothering with that. But this end over here is has had some mole issues, so there's lots of dead plants. The snapdragons really don't like the moles going under them. The moles have been under this celosia and foxglove over here, just kind of all planted together because a lot of the foxglove died when it was young from the moles. So there's celosia planted where the loss occurred, and now it's doing okay. It's wilting a little bit because of the moles, but we turn on the irrigation pretty regularly and it's all right. So over here we have a late succession of zinnias and cosmos, and at the end of this row is the calendula. And I have noticed on this row with the calendula right here next to it that the insects prefer the calendula. It is covered in caterpillars. Blister beetles have been bad here, and the grasshoppers really like the calendula, but I just kind of leave them alone because they're only eating this, and it's pretty much not happy right now anyway because it doesn't like the heat. And I don't really have any, I don't want to take it out. I actually took out chamomile that was right here, and when I did that, I noticed a serious increase in pests on all of the rest of these plants. All right, I'm going to come to the shade to finish talking. Anyway, yeah, when you take out something that the bugs are really enjoying, on one hand, it's good because you're removing their food source, but on the other hand, they might just move on to everything else. There also really are a lot of bugs on my feverfew, and they're not really affecting it as far as production, and it's pretty much done anyway. So I'm just letting them eat it. Now, another strategy there would be to spray the trap crop if you're like, so I should be spraying my calendula to kill all the bugs that get to it, and then I don't have to spray everything in the field. That gives the beneficial insects a better chance because they can continue to live on the other plants, but then I could just spray those. Or I could take it all out and, I don't know, if it wasn't in weed fabric, I could use a blowtorch or something. I mean, there's lots of options for trap crops and eliminating pests like that. But if you're just ripping something out and thinking the bugs will leave when you take it away, that does not always work. Okay, so one more thing before we wrap up on this update and I go put this puppy down for a nap is the tents back there that you can see from here. I'll head over there and show you. Okay, so these are just regular pop-up tents. We use them for shade with our other activities over with the animals in spring when the trees haven't leafed out yet. All right, so the tents are lower to the ground than they would be if you were just using them as tents because it makes more concentrated shade. We can keep the shade where we want it a little easier. So what is under there is our recent succession of sunflower seedlings. We transplanted the seedlings yesterday morning, and They are all doing awesome. None have wilted. It was 102 yesterday. If we had left them out in the sun on that black fabric, they would just fall over and die. And sunflowers, as you may know, do not like to be transplanted, so you kind of have to baby them a little bit anyway. We can't direct seed them at this point because of a few reasons. Birds, mice really like to dig up and eat sunflower seeds. We used to cover them to direct seed, and that is not going to work this year because it will just make them warmer. And being in that black fabric and then add a cover, they won't even germinate. Sunflowers don't really like to germinate when it's 100 degrees. Your germination rates will go down. So we germinate them in the shade in trays, and I have to water them like 75 times a day, and then transplant them. And for 3 or 4 days after transplanting, we really have to keep them in the shade and keep them wet. And in the shade, it's just a lot easier to keep them wet. And then after that first 3 or 4 days, we could take the tents down and just water them once a day or so, and they have been doing awesome. We have successions planted all over the field. We've been planting 250 pro-cut single stem sunflowers a week, and the succession I showed you a few minutes ago that's all opening is one of the first 250 successions. At first, early in the season, I was only doing like 75 to 130 or so. And not all of them were making it, because early in the season, when we first started transplanting, we had a lot of issues with slugs, like major slug issues. And they were just devouring our seedlings. But handily, when you have a drought, you don't have slugs anymore. All right, so that's pretty much our July flower farm update. Only other thing I could tell you about having a U-pick flower farm in a heat wave like this is that nobody wants to come pick flowers. We are only open in morning and evening hours normally. This week, with it over 100 degrees and it's supposed to be 104 on Sunday, we had an outdoor workshop scheduled for that day. We moved it to the next week when it is supposed to be in the 90s. We'll see if it actually happens. But yeah, nobody's here. We had I think 2 groups show up last night at 7 o'clock. We opened at 7 p.m. At 7 p.m. the field is completely in the shade, and it's hot, but it's not like it is in the sun. We also had a small group yesterday in the morning at 8:30 is when they were supposed to come. They were a little bit late. Bugs are landing on me like crazy. Anyway, it wasn't as hot. It was only like 85 or so, but it was really humid, and the sun is really intense in the field in the morning, which is what I'm dealing with making this video and why I have sweat all over me. But yeah, it's been really rough. When it's in the 80s and upper 80s and even 90, we had no issues with people coming out. Everybody was showing up. People wanted to spend time outdoors. Now nobody wants to be out in this. So we have to do the same amount of work, if not more, because I have to do more watering and a little bit less mowing, but I really should be mowing more. And we can't get any weeding done. It's just too hot for any of that. Which, speaking of weeding and all of that, having those tents, sorry, daisies at my feet, having the tents up really can really make weeding and stuff more pleasant as well, but it's kind of just a pain to move them around. But even with the tent in 100 degrees, it's just too hot to be working out here. So it really is affecting the bottom line this year. We are hoping for cooler weather in the fall and a lot of sunflowers. That's all I really have planned for fall. Last year people didn't come in the fall because of school starting, and in August it was in the upper 90s and we got really slow then. Also, it's just hard to predict what's going to happen. If we have a hot summer all summer, then it pretty much feels like we did all of this work for not very much money, not very much of anything, because like nobody gets to see it. I am selling some flowers wholesale this year, but we're talking like a very minimal amount per week compared to what we would have had coming in with the U-pick had it has the weather cooperated. Daisy is attacking the clover. So on that note, we will try to actually upload this video in a timely manner, and see you next time.